It still is a damn good game.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Coming from clocking in 60 or so hours in Shadow of the Erdtree, Dark Souls 3 has aged gracefully. And in this video, I'll tell you about the many things it still does well, and also absolutely shit on its weak points.
So, pack up god-tier soundtrack, not-so-decent bonfire placements, dumb boss attacks, and fan service galore. We are appraising this one, boys.
As ludicrous as it might sound, Dark Souls 3 was the entry point for many in this series. Isn't it funny that what was supposed to be the end of everything is actually the beginning for many? These figures might not be totally accurate, but 12 million players bought Dark Souls 3, 2 million more than Dark Souls 1 and 2. Dark Souls 1 being a prequel doesn't sound too bad if you think about it. Everything that is hinted at, gone or dead in the last entrance, is alive once more. So that's the inspiration for Aldrich's soundtrack. Neat. And that's how Gwendolyn is before being penetrated by a mass of dark goo. Just an unbelievable chore of a fight. Nice. The truth is, despite the criticism, this game is perfect for what it represents. A depressive congregation of nostalgia and melancholy about to end forever. You can see it in its music, in its locations, in its bosses, in its enemies. Look at this monstrosity praying to receive a swift death.
It demonstrates really well the nature of Souls games, where there are no happy endings, just lesser evils for the player to choose.
I mean, what game rewards us with the death of a character after completing his quest? Not only that, but before dying, he has to put down an old friend of his, who once was the noble monarch of the capital, now turned into a flame negationist because of how he accidentally killed his own subjects when he linked the flame. In these games, the purest intentions have never saved a character from death. I could talk about the say goodbye to this world theme in this game for a long time. It is that interesting, but for the sake of the review, let's move on to gameplay. Out of every From Software game, Dark Souls 3 is my third all-time favorite gameplay-wise, after Sekiro and Bloodborne. For me, its balance between defense and offense is perfect in some instances. People say it is like finding the halfway point between Bloodborne and Dark Souls 1. The combat is neither as sluggish and shield-oriented as the first one, nor as relentless as the hunter when the rally window is about to close. The weapon arts feel great, definitely the blueprint for the Ashes of War in Elden Ring, like for instance that one from Midir's katana, also known as the Moonveil prototype. Other less weapons have repeated special attacks, but hey, that is bound to happen when you have a weapon catalog of almost 200 items. What's more, the coolest ones, like the Abyss Watcher's sword, wouldn't be as special if every weapon had a different special attack. That doesn't mean the lesser ones don't have their uses. Even daggers are useful with their quick step special ability when you want to go through the poisonous swamp that slows you down.
Well, suck on that one, Miyazaki. You can still poison me, but no more slow rolling through your bullshit. Actually, now that I think of it, there is one pretty useless special attack.
And that is the katana parry. I've only tried this in PvE and it stinks! According to online data I have found, the active parry frames are lower than some medium shields. Which is not optimal, of course, and it costs FP! Look at this, it's horrible! The only positive side to it is how badass it looks. However, it is rarer than an average Generation Alpha citizen reading the terms of use of anything. Just equip the Iron Round shield, it is 100 times easier and doesn't cost FP. Luckily, they removed it in Elden Ring and gave the katanas one light and one heavy special attack. Moving on to Estus Flasks, they are finally back after 2 years of what I think to be the worst of its iterations. Dark Souls 2 had the longest animation if you didn't level up adaptability. You know, that legendary stat that everyone loved and embraced with a warm welcome. 2.2 seconds of drinking and progressive healing instead of instant? Come on, man. At least we didn't have to buy or farm for our healing consumables, right, Bloodborne? 2016 came in strong back with a rest to recover your Estus meta. Long live 2016, man. What a goated year. No wonder Elden Ring capped this formula. It is the only one that works for healing. Do you know what else feels just as goated? the soundtrack. This game has so many bangers, I had to laugh at Dark Souls 2 when I went through it to record How's Dark Souls 2 in 2024. If you try very hard, you can actually find some great themes in Dark Souls 2, most of them belonging to the DLC besides Majula, Nashandra's, and a couple more. Dark Souls 3 had me shivering my spine more often than not. It felt like I was watching Thor arrive in Wakanda over and over. Twin Princes, Abyss Watchers, Soul of Cinder, the main menu theme, Gale, Midir, Nameless King, Freed, Sullivan, Aldrich, Vord. If you ask me what's my favorite one, I really struggle to tell you it's Gale's.
As we all know, the area design was heavily criticized by the community, but that is something that I'm going to leave for later when we talk about the game's flaws.
For now, I will commend it for one thing people don't talk much about before briefly reviewing each area. The track limitation. Dark Souls 3 was the last game where we got to explore zones without a track playing in the background. And I had no idea how much I've missed this feature until recently, where I got to play all Dark Souls and Bloodborne for their reviews. In Elden Ring, no matter where you're at, you'll always be accompanied by a composition. Limgrave, Raya Lucaria Academy, every single one of its catacombs. Dark Souls 3 does an amazing job by limiting those to its bosses in Firelink Shrine. The sensation of emptiness, loneliness, and hopelessness you feel when all you can hear in the background are the tough enemies you must fight, the wind, and the sound of your worn-out armor going to battle once more? It's unparalleled. I can't feel those same things for which Souls games are known for when I have Limgrave's theme playing in the background. And don't get me wrong, I love that theme. I'll surely shed a few tears of nostalgia when I come back to it within 5 or so years, remembering my first time in Elden Ring. But man, I can't say it doesn't feel bad that the last time we got this silent treatment in a game was 8 years ago. Feel old yet?
By the way, if you're enjoying the content, consider subscribing. It helps me out.
Enough with the track rant. Now, let's go to analyze each general zone shortly. Cemetery of Ash is your average tutorial area, where you get cute weak enemies to bump for days, with the exception of that one enemy you must come back later on in the game if you want to stand a chance. In comparison to actual tutorial areas like the beginning of Yharnam, where if you die you get a transition cutscene to the Hunter's Dream to choose your loadout, or Elden Ring, where 99% of the player base got cooked by the grafted Scion and sent to a huge cave with a cutscene in between for a dedicated tutorial. Yes, dedicated tutorial, not just some notes on the ground. Dark Souls 3 feels very uninspiring. Kill some hollows, Gundyr, and walk straight through the fucking doors of Firelink Shrine like nobody's business. Where's the presentation? Dark Souls 1 had a unique arrival to our hub area, where a big crow drops us down. Dark Souls 2 had no such thing, but at least the entrance was breathtaking, the sun shining on Majula. The sea at the back, with waves crashing on the rocks. Very bland indeed, Dark Souls 3. Then there's also the Untended Graves time paradox, where not a single player knows if Firelink Shrine is in the past and the Untended Graves in the present, or vice versa. All we have is the theory that we killed Gundyr in Untended Graves, got his soul, which is why his hollow body full of darkness fights us in the tutorial. But how the hell did we travel to the past just by going through an illusory wall? This has never happened before. To travel to Ulasil, Manus snatches us through that portal. In Dark Souls 2, the past memories are time limited and we have to touch the remains of a dragon or a tree to relive them. Here, nothing happens, you just walk into another time plane. Guys, if you are going to do a copy and paste of some areas of the game, at least don't get lazy with the storytelling. High Wall of Lothric is okay, being the first actual level of the game. It does a great job by giving you enemies that can be quite punishing to players who just panic attack and panic roll. Manage your stamina, lure enemies out of the groups. If you have a shield, try to practice pairing with the very first hollows. Explore to open shortcuts and reduce walkbacks. It has a bit of everything, even a positive point towards replayability, because the dancer can be fought really early on since you already know what to do. And get up until Great Archives, even before stepping Undead Settlement. Speaking of which, Undead Settlement feels very much alive. It is full of NPC quests that you can miss if you don't explore thoroughly. Cornifex, the lift puzzle with the Onion Man, the fact that you can befriend the giant archer, who by the way can rain down arrows all the way to Farron Keep. A covenant that can only be accessed if you let yourself be trapped by one of those jailers. You can even fight a huge demon with Sigurd. Why don't we get more of these co-op moments with NPCs without summoning? It's such a fun part of the level. When I arrive to Road of Sacrifices, I tend to end my gaming session. I need to be fresh. Like, I just turned on my console type of fresh, because this area, man oh man, is very bland. The first part until the bonfire where Unri and Horace are located is more linear than Charnel Lane. Sorry, I can't. I get angry just thinking about it. Then there's a huge swamp full of small crabs, big crabs, and hungry hollows looking to cook these crabs with their steaks. The other hooded hollows that shoot projectiles are a bit of a hassle, all boring enemies with exception of the single Black Knight that exists there. As the lycanthropes and the boss, well, we'll see soon enough. The only redeeming quality about it is that that's where we find our first branching path, where we can either go to Farron Keep or Cathedral of the Deep. Going to Cathedral first, I am typically not a fan of huge indoor levels, unless they are as memorable as the Spencer Mansion. Of course, this one doesn't quite get there, but I must say it's nice. There are many features going on here. The wardens are dangerous yet entertaining enemies. I like how the infested corpses and the grub can leave you with a bleed status that feels like it takes 17 hours to go away. It makes a harmless enemy turn into a nightmare. The layout of the level is pretty good, starting from the upper floors and slowly making your way down, opening different shortcuts back to the level's main bonfire next to Gale. The surprise of the Deep Accursed, Patches and his unending quest to fool the player, how they changed his reaction whether you've killed the giant or not.
Where's the old giant? What? Look at the bloody giant! Just what have you done?
Amongst other things that make this level a big adventure. To contrast this, Farron Keep is a big pile of garbage. The Elder Grooves are too much to handle in the snowy mud, unless you come back later overleveled or you're using those sharpened twin-cell sword blades that break the game. I don't know what kind of traumatic story Miu Sake has had with the toxic swamps, but he's got to stop trying to push that down our throats. It's infuriating. With the exception of the Dark Wraiths, the enemies are not fun at all. Snails, who cares about them? The Grooves, no. Not this one. This one are obnoxious, especially those that leap into the air while getting hit. Can you respect that it's my turn, you wolf-lamb breeding piece of... The level is bad, no two ways about it, and I have a special hatred towards it because of the hours I spent farming Dark Wraiths before the boss fights to get those damn tongues. Second worst farming location in this game. Any redeemable qualities? I like the fading stray demon, and the details in that completely optional hidden fight like mashing R1 and L1 to escape his grab, the location connecting with the entrance to Undead Settlement, and depending how you fight it, it can break towards the end. A great metaphor to how everything around is crumbling into dust. Catacombs of Carthus and Smoldering Lake are quite meh for me. They are definitely an upgrade from Farron Keep, but still, I never liked this type of level in any game. So much so, I've created a petition to remove sewers and cave levels from games. They are too bland and boring. Fuck the depths. Screw Tomb of the Giants, and definitely ban from existence the sewers in Mortal Kombat mythologies. Blatant copy and paste frame by frame, the hell were the devs thinking? The enemy variety in Cartus is quite dog poo-poo. It's like skellies and all their variations from basic to chads to big ballers and rats, like we haven't seen those enough already. I really don't want to comment on boss fights in this segment, but god damn it is obvious that Wolnir is one of the absolute worst in this game. Any nice things here? You can swing around the Demon King's tail, defeat a lesser Demon King by tag teaming with skeletons and a mimic, hang out with that annoying friend that when he gets drunk he runs away from you, and not much more really. Ah well, the deployable bridge is a nice gimmick, I guess. Luckily, after going against back-to-back low-mid zones, we finally arrive at possibly the most gorgeous, packed with detail and interesting to explore area, Irithyll. To make it shorter, I'll put all of them together, the town, the dungeon, and Anor Londo. As you start, big jump scare. Damn you bastards! Lore implications, who are these two specters going out? Boom, the dancer and Vords. Who's the most messed up character who's been ruining everything for everyone? There you go, Old Sullivan. Wait, are we going back to Anor Londo? I recognize this place, isn't this where we fought? No, okay, not anymore. These creatures are quite spooky, I would watch where I step. whoa, I think I could live here. You know, if it wasn't ruled by a literal I'll destroy the world type of dude. That was basically a summary of my emotions playing through this level. And I wish those teleporting dogs rotting hell from where they came from. Help me! Oh god! Oh god! On the other hand, the dungeon is pretty bad, honestly. All enemies are recycled except for these jailers. One of the worst enemies ever, second place to the Winter Lanterns. It's very frustrating how inconsistently your health drops sometimes, even while grounded. They reduce some of your HP, and no, don't tell me it's the smoke, because it's not. More rats again, hollow reskins, a room with like 10 of these whores when only 2 or 3 is actually all you need to have your health reduced to the size of your friend's pride when he talks to the girl who's ghosted him for 7 months. Terrible. Just terrible. At least those baby, spooky kind of NPCs are, a bit terrifying. Continuing to the profaned capital, just make a beeline to Yorm because there's nothing worth it here. Terrible level design, too short, too boring. Gargoyles are okay, but they are not original to this level. And I guess I was a bit disappointed when I got to a level called Capital. I expected more than a corridor and a turn right and left to get to the boss. Of course, you have the zone where you have to save Sigurd with the hippo hand dudes, their official name being Monstrosity of Sin. Nice. But still, you know what other game has a zone called Capital? Yes, Elden Ring. And yes, Leyndell. And you already know how huge that area is. More than just a climbable building to release a buddy of yours and some hallways leading to a puzzle fight. Archdragon Peak is nice. Shortly, although it doesn't have much enemy variety, all of them are new. The Serpent Men, the Summoners, the Drake Knights. Havel? An epic duel against the original, let me tank him, and I made it even better by making it an Artorias vs Havel HD 4K 100% canon no clickbait fight? Perfect. The level design might be a bit simplistic. I mean, the continuity of it is basically your character falling asleep and waking up there, and after the first boss fight, he gets teleported to a new location of the level, so no, not very original. But I still like it for what it is. A simple, hidden level with some amazing sights, new enemies, a summon that is not precisely dedicated to a boss fight, a bonk sponge, Havel or just a Havel fan, and so on. P.S. Don't come to Archdragon Peak expecting to see Archdragons. You'll have to wait until the DLC to see the last of its kind. At last, Lothric Castle, Consumed King's Garden, and Grand Archives are your average unending endgame zones. I consider the Garden and Grand Archives part of Lothric Castle, which is why I'm putting them all together. This is it. You're going after the last lord who rejected to link the flame. It is time to feel like an unstoppable force. The castle has put its defense together to prevent any Ashen One from reaching the top. Barricades, Lothric Knights, soldiers, priests, gargoyles, mother truck and gravity, a wyvern, wax, you name it, they have it. Is Lothric Castle actually a disguised Walmart? The place is a maze, so many missable rooms and corners to explore. Challenging enemies like the Winged Knight, or annoying combinations of lesser enemies like that arrow guy, a mist guy, and random big axe guy. A Boreal Knight in a tight spot. Those are never nice. The intricacy of this level compensates for how simplistic the garden is. And well, the archives, you can dip your head in wax and look like a kebab with extra white sauce. I would support this type of Miyazaki fetish instead of toxic swamps, Imagine if you could dip your head in ketchup in Elden Ring. One can only dream about this sort of utopic society.
Now, before we get to the bad, let's rank some bosses real quick. This time, I'm going to put them in an order of worst to best. You definitely know which one is coming first.
From Software took a page from Capcom's book of boss fights with weak spots, where Capcom is like, hey, can you guess this mutation's weak spot? Can you? It's hard, right? FromSoft went for the obvious color palette contrast. Since everything is black and white, yeah, and those bracelets are yellowest than the sun itself, don't you think, that they could be the thing that needs hitting? Well, I'll be damned, they are. That wouldn't be so bad per se, but the fact that he summons grunts to help him, and that miasma that follows him can kill you pretty quick, makes it a real chore to die to. Especially because of the runback, which takes a minute or so, which is not so bad compared to others in the franchise like Seaths. However, it just adds more to a pile of salt that was already big enough without it. Every Souls game needs to have at least one bad puzzle fight in it. Bloodborne has Mikolash, Dark Souls 1 has Bed of Chaos, Dark Souls 2 has Royal Rat Vanguard, Sekiro has the Monkeys, Elden Ring has Renalla's first phase. Well, we've just started this ranking and Dark Souls 3 already has 2 of its puzzle fights in the last spots. The only slightly entertaining thing to happen in this fight is when you fall through the floor and continue the fight in that hole. Everything else is a hassle, from killing the smaller hollow villagers to hitting its weak spots to avoid its acid or whatever it is that it spits. The runback is 40 or so seconds long, which, just like Wolnir's, isn't bad, it just adds salt to injury. Uninspiring movesets, it just smashes and sweeps with its hand or flops every now and then. And lastly, if you don't do an NPC's quest and kill this boss, you won't be able to join the Mount Maker's Covenant for the rest of this playthrough. What can I say to a boss that you can kill in one hit after going through an entire obstacle course filled with tedious spammy enemies? I would rather not say anything at all for my channel's sake. And that final hit is missable if the wyvern's head is not in the correct spot when you plunge. If that happens, you'll have to go through everything again. The reasons why this is in better spots than the previous two are: wyverns are cool, the puzzle requires a bit more of thinking, and the closest bonfire isn't in a different time zone, but rather next to the boss fog wall. A teleporting mage that runs away from you just to shoot projectiles. You catch up to him, smack him a few times, and continue the loop until phase 2, where he'll create copies of himself. If you hit the real one, all copies die instantly. He teleports to a new location with more copies, do the same again. Does this sound interesting? I hope not. I don't want to give a single credit to this half-assed fight. Get unlucky enough and he'll kill you with some random projectiles while you stick your foot up a clone's ass. Fun fact, in this playthrough, I died 5 or 6 times to the Nameless King, and 6 or 7 times to the Sage because I kept guessing wrong. 3 out of 10, I like the sounds he does. Always hit the guy with the glowing aura, except if he's Goku. In that case, just accept your imminent death due to the power of friendship. The only thing I regret was bringing a katana to a Pharaoh Greatsword fight. Can you imagine doing the special move right in the center of that crowd? Must be sweeter than finding an excellent game without meaningless microtransactions. Yes, don't hide behind the huge coffin to cover yourself from their big black balls. It won't work. Yorm is a fair change of pace. If you follow the intended order of the game's fights, your previous boss must have been Sullivan or Aldrich. I know for a fact I'll have some random mother fluffer in the comments saying, "Hey, I fought Tutorial Gundyr before Yorm. I'm such a sequence breaker." No, you're not. You're as worthless as a participation trophy. Anyway, Yorm isn't hard. In fact, he's one of the easiest bosses in the game. And that's a letdown because I didn't expect such incompetence from a Lord of Cinder. The actual challenge in the fight is equipping Stormbreaker without dying if your inventory has hundreds of weapons. That is, if you even know you have to equip it to fight him. Otherwise, you'll be looking like this. Points in favor, the tragic conclusion to Sigmayr's quest, and how satisfying it is to hit Yorm with the Storm Ruler. I like this tutorial fight. It's not the best From Software has given us when put against the Gascoigne, Cleric Beast, Genichiro, a Silent Demon, but it is decent enough to make it here. He's not too oppressive, his telegraphing is readable, the arena is wide open, which means you won't be getting caught next to the walls and have camera issues with the puzz of man that comes out of him. Good. Old Demon King is a decent fight. I like the symbolism of fighting the last of its fading kind. In Dark Souls 1, the word demon was thrown in every direction. Taurus Demon, Capra Demon, Centipede Demon, Stray Demon. Here, it is safe to say he's the only demon we meet in the base game. Maybe 2 if you count the crumbling Stray Demon on the cut bridge to Undead Settlement. If you haven't noticed this lack of demons yet, his arena will make it very apparent. They are all dead. In terms of gameplay, most of his attacks are clear. There is variation in his combos. He might spam a little too much sometimes, but that's manageable. What really gets to me are those unnecessary attacks to prolong the fights, like when he summons fireballs to chase you away, and the classic From Software "fuck you, get off me" explosion that completely kills the pace of the fight because, run away or die. In all my playthroughs of this game, Osiris wasn't as bad as a lot of people say, but I understand where they are coming from. His second phase is unstable. It depends whether you get lucky or not with clipping through his body while he goes berserk trying to attack you. And that's where my single disappointment with him comes from. You don't need to learn the fight, adapt, understand the timing. Just stay as close as you can to him and many attacks will whiff, kind of like Sif when you get underneath him. Careful, Sif might do a harmless jump to get away. Cyrus does a charge that isn't specially telegraphed. So don't start spamming even though you're safe next to him. You see how weird that sounds? Safe next to him? It shouldn't be like this. Fido from the Tammany Grove Valley.
Easy, Fido. How about I take you out for a walk? Come on, puppy. Let's go.
Sorry, I couldn't help comparing him to the Cerberus in Devil May Cry 3. I know his weapon is not a nunchaku, but a hammer. After a hard, detailed observation, I realized that he doesn't have 3 heads. But man, I see Frozen Dog, I think of Frozen 3-headed dog. Anyway, cool fight, very trivial in subsequent playthroughs, but still entertaining, especially in the second phase when the la 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 soundtrack kicks in and you remember all the Souls memes you've watched in Instagram or TikTok with that track. Gwendolyn, you poor thing! Big black good from the back and still forced to fight while being digested? I know his boss fight in Dark Souls 1 was crap, but I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Being a Lord of Cinder, he ranks this quote-unquote low because of a pet peeve I have with this fight. He is memorable for reasons that weren't created for him. His track isn't 100% original to him. His character isn't an 100% original model, since it is partially Gwendolyn. And we already know who are the owners of this arena. He is just a huge blob of fan service. Don't get me wrong, it is still enjoyable, the projectiles are handled well, in spite of how bothersome they are, and that is because sometimes he shoots those arrows when he goes away, so instead of being left with nothing to do while he relocates, I am busy running for my life. And that's what the Sage should have done also. Since I don't have a single way of tracking your next spawn, at least leave me something behind to keep me entertained. If you've been watching me for a while, you'll know I always appreciate a well-crafted one-on-one against a humanoid boss. Champion Gundyr delivers, Pontiff kind of, the Watchers kind of. You get the point. There aren't many of these in the game, and that's fine, I won't complain about something that is too subjective. But man, when I get one, I enjoy it to its fullest. Nothing too fancy here, just one big iron armor against a dude with a curved sword. That is, until the dragons start shooting projectiles in the arena. But I don't mind it too much. The fight is fine, and if you play it carefully, all his attacks are easily avoidable. Don't get too cocky, that's when most go hollow. Sullivan is a great boss. Like I said before, he's the supposedly orchestrator of most of the bad things that happen in this game, from turning a poor dancer and Vords into abominations, convincing Lothric and Lorien not to link the First Flame, and many others. So, for those with 99 insight, the weight of the fight doubles. Instead of coming in and thinking, ooh, look at this cool cleric wielding 2 lightsabers, who is he? The track of the fight is awesome. The setting sets the tone of, this is not just a random arena, it's a church. This guy is someone very important. The way he slowly approaches you until you see his lit swords very badass. The only gripe I have with this fight is how parry-inducing it is. It's like you need to learn how to parry or you'll get cooked 1,000 times because of how often he attacks. And I hate fights that try to enforce a playstyle in a game that is generally sold as any playstyle is viable, with sorcery being a little too viable. And even though, here he is, in 7th spot. Remember what I said before about playing 1v1s against the humanoids? Look no further than Champion Gundyr, one of the few fights to fit that description to a T. No gimmicks, no magic, no clones, no teleporting, just a character aspiring to be worthy and Gundyr testing his mettle. Grabs, kicks, pushes you with the strength of his full-body Fangway style, in an arena only lit by flames of candles and torches around it. You can now see his red eyes and the rays it traces while he moves. After he moves into second phase, in which he simply is stronger, faster, more oppressive. Like I said, nothing too fancy. I love its simplicity. Every Souls game should have a couple of these fights where there aren't any earthquakes, tornadoes, dudes flying in lasers, just a normal dude who's pure skill with his normal weapon. Period. I appreciate the dancer for what it is, a fight that you can trigger at any moment past the tutorial. She can be your 12th or your second boss in other playthroughs. It's all up to you to break the intended order. The track is ominous, maybe even terrifying. Sounds tragic, like her story with Sullivan. The way the room catches fire after she slams her fiery sword from one side to the other, her breathing, the footsteps. Sometimes I listen to her theme on YouTube and I always choose the version with her footsteps included, because they just make it much more immersive. The way she starts spinning with her dual blades while the track announces we have entered her second phase. Everything about it is just pure cinema. Recommendation: spend at least 27 or so points in HP or pray that her meat stick grab misses you, because that's an insta-kill if you don't have more or less that amount of HP. Radon and Mikula from AliExpress. Just joking, in terms of fun gameplay, the princes are miles ahead of them. Typically, teleporting is a dick move, used to run away to safety in most of these games. But not with these two. Lorien will come at you relentlessly with those TPs. Totally advisable to be locked on him at all times. Your screen will follow him, except when he goes away to attack you with that wave of energy. The track is my third favorite in this game, after Gales and Abyss Watchers, and I consider it to be that type of fight that only goes south if you allow it to go south and start panicking. The timing to dodge the wave of energy is very forgiving. His sword combos are not complicated to memorize. He typically does 1 or 2 slashes or thrusts. And the fact that Lothric can heal Lorien if you deplete Lorien's HP first shouldn't be a big deal, because you get a huge amount of time to finish both while Lothric is busy reviving his brother. The only nuisance I can think of are the small projectiles that Lothric leaves behind after teleporting, but most of it can be resolved with doing zigzags while locked on Lorien to keep an eye on what he's doing. Typical FromSoft. One of its best boss fights hidden behind an optional area that can only be accessed by doing a gesture in a specific location, and that gesture is only obtained after defeating the boss of another optional area. Nice! With a little item reading, you find out he is Gwyn's firstborn, yet he is nameless because his father stripped him of his titles and his name after he chose to help the dragons against his father. Nice! We fight him on top of clouds with a storm in the background. And he starts the first phase riding a dragon, which isn't a chore to go through in the following tries after dying over and over and over. Nice! He's got a transition cutscene where he absorbs the energy of his beloved pet. Nice! Does this fight have any flaws? Fuck me, I don't think so. Radagon and Elden Beast should have learned something from him. Don't make the first phase a hassle to go through, or the fight won't be likable. His toughness comes from phase 2, where he is agile, strong, and scary. He does decent damage, nothing exaggerated. His attacks aren't hard to time, maybe with exception of that one where he starts flying before going down for a stinger. This fight is hard. He is part of Gwyn's bloodline after all. I always recommend coming here right before going to the kiln. Makes it a much more enjoyable fight. I was level 86, I think, and I still died 5 times after playing through this game for the 4th time for this review, so yeah, he's no pushover. I love this fight. I really do. Right from the start, before going inside, you can hear a battle is going on behind this door, so you start wondering, what is it? Then you see 2 Watchers fighting, and the reason is that they were trying to contain the Abyss influence that was coming out from Kartus, hence why they stationed right before entering the catacombs. In the process of fighting the Abyss, they were corrupted by it, and well, their working policy is basically, we will destroy anything and anyone slightly contaminated by the Abyss. That's why they are fighting each other. That fight must have kept them there, killing each other for a long while because 1. Look at the amount of dead corpses on the floor. 2. Just like you, they are undead, which means they get back, even without the corruption of the Abyss. Killing your brothers until the end of time? Fuck me, that's edgy. Count me in! Enough with the lore, let's talk about gameplay. It is genius. Never in a From Software game have we seen a fight where it starts as a 1v1, then a 1v2, then a 1v1v2. Yes, the red-eyed guy attacking them is not with you. Essentially, the fight can be manipulated to be played out in many different ways before killing the main guy and move into second phase. You can kill the red-eyed watcher, fight a 1v2. Not the smartest idea. B. Kill the support watcher and do 2v1 against the watcher with the boss health bar. Be careful not to hit the red-eyed watcher. He will turn on you until he gets hit by the boss watcher. C. Focus on the support watcher every time he respawns and let the red-eyed watchers deplete the boss health. D. 1v3 them because you like torture. The story is so tragic, the gameplay is so flexible and fun, and also easy for people who wants to get them out of the way quick. You can parry and backstab them. The track is one of the best I've ever seen in From Software music. For me, the male voice represents the camaraderie between them and their duty, and the female voice, the agony of what they've been put through. As a last attempt to avoid death, the last watcher to come back resorts to the power of the wolf blood, which maintains them bonded. The power of the abyss, because he rises with red eyes, and the power of a Lord of Cinder, since they linked the flame once. He is going all out, and your job is to put him out of his misery. The kiln of the first flame, one more time, one last time. The minimalistic direction of this fight was a perfect idea, I think. After all, Soul of Cinder is not a special character for a final boss fight who you've bonded with like in Sekiro and Bloodborne, nor does it belong to the story, so it needs no introduction, no halfway cutscene. It is an amalgamation of every possible fighting style in the first game because it is a collection of every player that linked the flame in their Dark Souls 1 playthrough. That is why you can see it using a scimitar, a sword, a spear, partially spamming the R2 attack like any player would, healing spells, projectiles, and many others. After depleting his health bar once, we see he adopts a new fighting style, one with a fiery longsword and lots of lightning. The last to tell that this is a well-known character is in the track, where we can hear Gwyn's bling bling plans notes. Now it all becomes apparent. The grab, the many hits combo that everybody used to abuse to get a parry, now turned into a half-grab Manus style. Soul of Cinder is a beautiful fight for what it represents, the beginning of the end of an era. I love the fight. The fact that his moveset is so huge doesn't make the fight complicated at all. Everything is reactable. Sometimes the problem is not reading the attack, but reacting properly to it. For instance, the delay in his spinning spear. The thing is, if you've played with different builds in this game, you'll surely recognize some moves from your adventures, and that's what's beautiful about it. It rewards knowledge acquired throughout the years. One day, I hope they begin a new franchise, such as Dark Souls again, and deliver us at least 2 connected games instead of releasing one standalone title. Because nowadays there aren't many developers capable of putting such effort into world building, let alone a complex world that is supposed to last 2 to 3 deliveries. Nowadays it's mostly about big bad guy wants to conquer the whole galaxy. And with any luck, big bad guy receives a bland generic backstory like my insert dead family member has died and now there's no hope.
In Dark Souls 1, there was something called button queuing, which was basically, if you execute an action, and while your character is doing this action, you input another action, then it's going to be queued to happen after the first one finishes. For some reason, I didn't notice it as much as with this game, maybe because Dark Souls 1 had a more slowed down pacing.
In Dark Souls 3, since things are almost as fast as in Bloodborne, every second matters. To my dismay, button queuing is still a thing in this delivery, and it sucks. My most noticeable problem with it was fighting the big knights in the Cathedral of the Deep, where they have a quick attack where they bash you with their shield, most likely to interrupt any sort of spam. So what happens is, I attack, and when my attack is about to land, I press roll before I roll. He hits and staggers me, but the roll is still queued, so it comes out at the wrong time, without me pressing anything, and I'm done, because the knight has crushed my spine with his hammer due to a mistimed roll that I didn't press to happen. Thank you, Dark Souls.
If you are a fan of these games and you interact often with the community, you must know that one of the most common complaints about this title is that it is very freaking linear.
At first glance, things are already very obvious. Let's be quick and compare just a few connections. In Dark Souls 1, Firelink Shrine connects directly with the Valley of the Drakes, the Catacombs, Undead Asylum, the Undead Burg, the Undead Parish, and New London Ruins. In Dark Souls 3, it connects with the 3 minutes long tutorial area. In Dark Souls 3, you have around 5 branching paths, where the game allows you to choose your next location to visit. One is after you defeat the Dancer. You can choose to go to Lathric's Castle, or to Consumed King's Garden. The second, Cathedral of the Deep, or Farum Keep. The third, Smoldering Lake or Irithil. The fourth, the Dungeon or Anorlando. And finally, Archdragon Peak or Profaned Capital. Notice how 3 of these 5 lead us to optional areas where we don't even need to be What's more, every branching path has an end of the line. What do you do in Cathedral of the Deep after you defeat the boss? Do you A. take a shortcut that leads you back to an important area, or B. sit next to the bonfire and teleport? For crying out loud, think of Quelaag and the gargoyles. At the exact beginning of the game with the Master Key, you can go straight to Quelaag and you don't even need big balls because the AI there is so outdated. It would just take you longer to defeat her, but not more skill. Then defeat her, work your way to the parish, defeat the gargoyles, ring the second bell, and arrive at Sin's Fortress, which makes the depths, Gaping Dragon, most of Blighttown, and Capra Demon completely optional, something you would have never done in your first playthrough, and people say Dark Souls 1 doesn't have replayability. Do you actually want to know who doesn't have it? The game who chose to spice things up with +1, +2, and +3 versions of the rings we already had. This fucking game stared at Dark Souls 2, thought about the things that made it memorable, like the aesthetics, new enemy locations, new boss spawns like Freya and the Twin Pursuers, the variation of starting zones, new weapons like the Moonlight Greatsword, and finally, he said,
No thanks, bro.
And proceeded to give us nothing but some rings that do the same thing as the ones in New Game, but with better stats. Bravo! You could have at least invented something new for New Game Plus, like for example, give us a ring that has, I don't know, the Hunter's rally system for Bloodborne, make it as useless as Malenia's rune in Elden Ring, you know. So it is neither broken in PvP nor PvE,
But nah. We're in Lazy Town, boys. Do you want to know what other memorable feature they dumped from Dark Souls 2? The Power Stance, which luckily has made its comeback in Elden Ring. Power Stance means your character unlocks a new moveset if he's holding two weapons of the same kind. It does more damage at the cost of consuming more stamina, but above all else, it looks cooler. They must have retired them from Dark Souls 3 because they wanted a heavy emphasis on experimenting every weapon's special attack with L2 to test it before Elden Ring came out. However, it didn't cut it. Players felt wronged. Why can't I dual-wield my weapons of preference and instead I have to use these predetermined dual swords that feel spammy as hell? I definitely think they wanted to push this style in this game and make it likable through the sellsword twin blades. I don't believe it was a mere coincidence that a weapon with a new fighting style introduced in this game is by far the most broken. It breaks posture easily, infuse it with sharp to scale excellently with an A dexterity rating. It comes with a starting class, and if you don't choose it, you can find it in the 5th area of the game, not even hidden. It's as if they were screaming, use it! Use this and break everything! PvE, PvP, the gods, the universe, everything is yours! Speaking of broken in PvP, have you got any idea how broken PvP is when you can roll with 0.1 stamina? From Software could have retitled this game as Bark Rolls 3 to represent the two most annoying things in the game, and I would have been cool with it. Because there's no way in hell that you can catch someone who's roll spamming with bad internet. Dark Souls 1 was laggy as hell, but at least if you ran out of stamina, you had to wait a bit before doing any actions such as rolling. Here, you can just mash the button, and your character will roll more than standing on their own 2 feet. It does not make any sense. How can someone with more bones than flesh roll like Sonic the Hedgehog? Covenants are pointless. I'm glad they were removed from Elden Ring if they were going to continue in this state. They only serve as a lock to some cool spells and weapons that they decided if the player wanted to get them, they would have either to partake in the worst PvP ever or farm for hours in PvE since some random mobs drop the objects needed to increase the bond with the Covenant. But the drop rate of some of those feel like lower than 2% even with all pieces of outfit to increase luck. There is no punishment for abandoning them, no perks for joining a player. For example, as a Sunbro, the only thing that changes is that you have a yellow aura instead of a white one, and your summoning animation is Praise the Sun instead of the normal one. It's so uninspiring and drags on for so long, like, you want the Wolf Ring? Kill 30 hosts online. You want the Platinum of the game? Kill around 150 hosts. And bear in mind that right now the game is not as active, of course. It's been 8 years since its release, and also that more often than not you'll also be at a disadvantage since people love to 2v1 or 3v1 against invaders. And I don't blame them. Invasions aren't more than a chore. Big weapons feel weak, The damage I can do spamming Twin Blades is higher than any big bonk I can dish out with a great sword. There is no point in going for big boy R2s when I can slither my way in mashing R1s, especially with this game's fast-paced nature. Look at this clip of me struggling with a pack of dogs. I couldn't for the sake of my fucking life poise through their attacks. They always interrupted me. I had to switch to my Uchigatana to say adios to those rabbit fucks. Lastly, I think the game is quite short. Even though I visited every area, explored everything for this video, defeated every boss, even the optional ones, every enemy, never ran past them except for the ones I had already defeated before dying, it took me around 16 or 15 hours to finish it. That's an additional stat to show the straightforwardness of the game and how easy it is sometimes. And I didn't even use the most broken weapons. There are too many bonfires next to each other, so if you die, you can quickly get back to where you were. I mean, watch these clips and tell me, how many bonfires are too many bonfires?
My conclusion is, although a dumbed-down version of what made its predecessors great, Dark Souls 3 is an amazing and awesome game. I love it.
Looking back in time, RPGs were not the only to suffer from this. It reminds me of the StarCraft case, where StarCraft 1 had a much steeper learning curve, and 12 years later, they made things much easier and accessible to everyone. And of course, die-hard fans of the game were furious. Dark Souls 3 does not have that... When will I find a bonfire next? I have so many souls on me, I don't want to lose them. There are too many checkpoints everywhere. I love how it fixed some things that Dark Souls 2 was horrible at, such as level continuity, uninteresting enemies and ganks, uninspiring bosses, but in the process of fixing those, it lost great details from its brothers, like level design and a real chance to choose from many viable builds, since choosing a shorter R1 spammy weapon is the way to go.
I'm glad we still got a great game and received what I think is a great ending to a franchise such as Dark Souls. Thank you, comrades, for watching this video, and now, just like Dark Souls 3, it's time for me to fade away. See you in the next one.